If you could please, or reconvene the meeting, and if you could please take your seats, and we'll now move to item 9, and that's a report on the Eastern Busway, an update on the Eastern Busway, and it's from the Program Director for the Busway, Duncan Humphrey, and I have a mover for the motion in Councillor Paul Young. And Councillor Young, this is your first motion you're moving as an Auckland councillor, and it'll be seconded by Councillor Stewart, also a Howard Ward councillor. So it's moved and seconded, and Duncan, in your hands for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Busways, they are a hot topic at the moment. So look, I'd just like to give you an update on what is currently Auckland Transport's largest capital project. It's had a long history, it's been around a long time, but we are now seeing, I think, the fruits of labour, and we are very close to actually starting physical work on the main component of the AMETI program. So just in case anyone's not aware of this, I'll just take you through the structure of the program. So it is a multimodal program. It has extensive walking and cycling improvements included. But the main component, as I've said, is a BRT, a bus rapid transit system from Panmure down to Botany. There are also significant safety improvements throughout the corridor as well, and there are improvements for general traffic in different locations as well. So we have split the program, the main busway program, into 4 stages. So we simply call it the Eastern Busway 1, 2, 3, and 4. As I'll describe in a second, the Eastern Busway 1 is about to commence construction fairly early next year. And then some components up there as well have already been completed. Probably notable just to mention as well, in the centre of the drawing there is a Pakuranga Town Centre, and that's where we have one station there and the Reeves Road flyover, which I'll take you through a little bit later on. And then down in the bottom right hand side there, down at Botany, there's an interchange planned there. That is currently part of the Airport to Botany program. But we will see that come across to AMETI to deliver fairly shortly. So I guess just a little bit about the strategic context of AMETI. So that what you have there on the left-hand side is the current strategic public transport network. And really you can see it's fairly obvious that area of Botany and Howick, that eastern area, is not connected to that rapid transit network at the moment. So AMETI is the vehicle that does that. It really gives that area, which is 120 odd thousand people, that high quality connection to rapid frequent transport. So similar to rail basically. And you can see one of the stats there is, so we have predicted that we'll be carrying around about 7,500 people through the peak hour when it's fully operational. So a little bit about the timeline. We have recently secured our notice of requirement for the next phase, for EB1 as we call it, Eastern Busway 1. We are heavily into demolition and archaeology at the moment. That's around Lagoon Drive in particular, if you know the area. You'll see some work evident there already. And now we are in the procurement phase as well for that. So we are rapidly heading towards a award of a contract towards the end of this year. And then in parallel with that, we're also working on, I guess, our travel demand management program, which is about really mitigating the risk of disruption to the network during construction. It's a highly sensitive area, so we've put a lot of effort into this, and we know that we really have to demonstrate that we've done everything we can to mitigate the disruption around that area. And then further down, so these dates, we've actually been through a rebaseline of our program within the last 2 weeks, and we've had some more work done around construction timeframes in particular, so they're a little bit different at the moment. So EB2, which is the Reeves Road flyover and Pakuranga Town Centre component, that would start around mid-2021. And then including the busway from there all the way to Botany, the intention is to complete that by mid-2025. So it is quite a long time. and the interchange as well would also be complete by mid-2025. So these timeframes that you see here, they're actually a little bit out of date. We've done some work, like I say, in the last 2 weeks. So I'll just move forward. And just some key statistics, really. The one at the top there, 38 minutes, is an important one for us. So that is the time to go from Botany to the CBD, including a change at Panmure from bus to rail. And we are achieving that at the moment. So we're doing quite well, and I think we actually have opportunities to look for further improvements on that through some really good value engineering and innovation work around the design. But it is a big project, as you can see. It's 7 kilometres long, roughly, and that includes sort of the busway, but also walking and cycling improvements, the whole length, fully segregated as well. We've got 3 new stations, including the Panmure station that was constructed, and we have 2 significant bridges as well, specifically for the busway. And one of them will be replaced. One existing road bridge will be replaced with a larger bridge that can also cater for the busway. And then that 13% is an interesting statistic. So currently, this area, as you'd expect, is well down on its patronage and other modes. So we are about 5, just over 5%, with a regional average of just over 8%. Now, the forecast for this in 2026 is to get it up to the regional average of around about 13 to 13.5%. So it's quite a big jump, hence the reason for a busway and not bus lanes. We need a step change in the quality of service to actually drive the behaviour change in this area. And there's I guess the total cost at the moment is 1.4 billion. That is all of AMETI, so that's not just the busway and not just the EB 1, 2, 3 and 4. That includes about $200 million worth of work in the next decade, RLTP as well. But by the time we are finished the main components, with inflation, that number is currently forecast to be 1.63, I believe. So that's an uninflated number. And as I've said, I've given you, I guess, an update on EB1. We do intend to, so we're awarding the physical works contract towards the end of this year. And then there is a period of about 3 months where we work through management plans, so construction management plans, which is a requirement from our notice of requirement process. They have to be approved by Auckland Council, and then we can start work. So currently the actual physical start date on site would be around about March, early March next year. But like I say, in the meantime, we're working heavily on our demolition, archaeology and travel demand management programs to mitigate the risks around that. So stage 2 and 3, which is the Pakuranga component and then the busway down to Botany. So we've been working through the design, a preliminary specimen design as we call it, and we have reached a point now where we're about to go out to public consultation on that design. I'll show you a few components of it a bit later on, but we intend then to do our assessment of environmental effects and prepare for our notice of requirement to be lodged around about the middle of next year. And then following that process, which is quite a lengthy process, we will tidy up the design and then go to market. So as I've said, we're expecting to start construction around about mid-21 on those components. There may be some enabling works and preliminary works involving services and things like that prior to that. But the main, I guess, thrust through on Rees Road flyover, Pakuranga Town Centre, and then the busway will be starting mid-21. So let's just give you a look and an idea of the look and feel. So this is Lagoon Drive. It's looking east. It is interesting in one sense in that this is an area of the scheme where we actually take 2 existing traffic lanes and they become part of our busway, so dedicated bus lanes. And then on the left-hand side, you can see that there is a significant improvement over what's there at the moment in terms of the walking and cycling provisions. This is a 4.2 metre shared path. There is a large retaining wall on that side as well to be constructed, but important to note that despite I guess the perception that taking these two lanes would have catastrophic effects on the traffic. It really is about the intersection improvements, which is where the bottlenecks are, not about the mid-block capacity. So we've done extensive modelling around this, and we're confident that this works because we've made significant improvements to the intersections at either end. And that's just a shot of Tamaki Estuary and the entrance to Panmure Basin there on the top left. It's one, I think, photograph that demonstrates actually just how beautiful this area really is when you see it from this angle. So we have a new bridge constructed alongside the old bridge. One important feature to note there is a gap, and this is an example of a historic dynamic lane, which you would have heard about earlier on. And if you're familiar with it, it's got a tidal flow system on the existing road bridge. So with the gap there is for us to be able to put a fourth lane or an extra lane on that bridge in future when it's reconstructed, which is around about 20 to 30 years. What we are doing though is moving some of the critical services. So there are all the East Auckland sort of lifeline services on the existing road bridge. We're shifting those onto our bridge, because our bridge will meet more advanced seismic standards, and it will be constructed basically to withstand things like barge strike, whereas there is a bit of a risk to the old bridge from that. The bridges themselves, or the new bridge, is also sympathetic to both the Panmure road bridge and the Waipuna bridge as well. It's a very similar design. It's not particularly different in its height. We've improved navigation a little bit underneath them for the channel. However, it's a very sympathetic design to blend in with the area. And this is a view of the Reeves Road flyover. So it's a little bit contentious being an urban flyover, and it is through the middle of a town centre, Pakuranga town centre. So we're aware that we have to work quite hard to ensure that this design activates the space around it, doesn't cause severance, and is in keeping with the town centre. So some of the features you can see here. So this wasn't the original design. We had a slightly different design, which was they're both architecturally designed, but this design has moved from piers, which are the columns in the middle, piers we had either side, to a central pier and bigger spans. And the reason for that is simply to create a brighter space and an easier spill through, easier to see either side, and easier movements underneath as well. It's meant to also look like the underside of a waka, and you can sort of see the outriggers there. There are opportunities for projecting artwork and things like that underneath. You can also see there that there is a vehicle moving down there. So one side is going to be a low volume road, particularly low volume road. So I think it changes from about 20,000 vehicles a day to 2,000. And then on the other side, which you can't really see, we would have a pedestrian space, and that could also accommodate some form of retail. And basically, we want that side of it to be an active non-transport space. And that's really it in summary. So it's quite brief, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Duncan. And for members' benefit, Councillors Paul Young and Sharon Stewart representing the Howick Ward, and Councillor Bartley representing Tamaki Māori, and myself representing the Planning Committee as a whole. Chairs of the respective boards, Howick and Tamaki Māori, are on a working party along with members of Parliament, Jamie Lee Ross for Botany, isn't it? And Simeon Brown for the Pakuranga electorate on a working party we met recently, and we are regularly kept abreast. And Duncan, really appreciate the work that your team does to bring us up to pace, because it's moving quite quickly now, and they're very thorough but concise and well presented working party meetings. I appreciate that. Councillor Stewart, question please.
Oh.
A question or comment? Because
really,
it is moved in. It was
really just a comment. I just wanted to more or less everything that you said. I also endorse, and I just also like to say that if Councillor Quacks was here, he'd be very, very pleased to see this is moving along, and it's a shame that he wasn't actually here to see it happening. So thank you very much for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart, and thanks for your absolute commitment to this project. and along with Councillor Paul Young. I did note in your election material, Councillor Young, that you were strongly advocating for getting this project through to completion, right through to Botany. So duly noted. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. It is good to see this item moved and seconded by our ward councillors in the Howick ward, especially given that this was a big project of the fuel tax. My question is, you know, given that this is one of AT's biggest capital projects, why is it only a 13% you know, goal that you're going for patronage?
So I guess the answer is that the 13.5 is the forecasted patronage across the region in 2026. So because we're well behind in this region, we're aiming to get to that statistic, as that's our target. But that certainly isn't to say that this busway does not have capacity well beyond that. So I mean, the numbers that we mentioned there, I think I mentioned 7,500 passengers in the peak period. It can carry a lot more than that. So we are catering for future growth as well. But the starting point is to bring it up to the regional average. And that regional average, I think, is also, so the regional average is jumping from around 8.5% to 13% by 2026. So it's a double jump for us.
All right, thank you. And I just have one more. I want to ask about the demolition of properties. I am aware of Basin View Lane. We have 22 tenants there, they're vulnerable tenants. So how has it been rehousing those tenants?
So we've worked extensively with Panuku around treating them appropriately because they are vulnerable tenants. We have gone above and beyond in terms of what we've provided. So we've provided lots of support services and we've tried to stage it as well in a way that doesn't cause everybody to have to go and look for property at the same time. I think so to a certain extent it's out of our hands, Auckland Transport's hands, because it's Panuku that actually do the work, but we've tried to offer everything we can above and beyond what we usually do. So I'm not saying it's easy, and it's certainly not an area where I think people can just go and find other accommodation really simply. One of the other things we've done as well, we've tried to allow these tenants to remain as long as possible. And you know, there is some risk to our program of doing that, but there is a point where we actually have to just push forward. So I guess I don't know whether that answers the question, but I think the message is that we've gone above and beyond as much as we could to help those people.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted councillors to be aware of the effect on my ward, because I was at the Permian Business Association AGM last night, and again they were talking about how they're affected by the lower rate, the number of businesses that have moved out of the area because of the AMETI project. So, you know, there are benefits, but PAMU is actually bearing the brunt of the consequences of this project.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. And maybe at some point, Duncan, do you want to cover, you know, that place activation, that the program that you'll have in place that is mindful of displacement of business that is running parallel? Do you want to respond to that now? Yes.
So we have a work stream within our program which is called Urban Product, and their role is essentially to ensure that the transport components leave behind land and opportunity that is the most attractive for development, for business, or for residential. It depends on where it is. So we have a whole work stream that's their job, to try and look at opportunities it may be things like leaving a site with retaining walls instead of batter slopes, so it's more attractive for development. And it could also be, we're not allowed to actually change the zoning, but we're allowed to make suggestions. So, you know, it does go well beyond the infrastructure components. So, you know, and particularly at Pakuranga would be a good example. We're working closely there with Panuku and Auckland Development ADO, Auckland Development Office, and Plans and Places to try and ensure that what we're doing in the town centre is complemented by Auckland Council in particular, but also by the mall owners there as well. So it's a very integrated approach for land use and the legacy of what we leave behind.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Bearing in mind this is a very car-centric community, so your comms program with the community, I presume that's well up and running. So I've got 3 questions.
Yes, yes, it is a car-centric community, and we have so part of our travel demand management program that I talked about, that's got an extensive communications component to it. In parallel with the TDM work, we also have our Auckland Transport initiated comms, which is separate to that. So we actually want to educate the public just about the project in general. And then in parallel to that, we will have a communications plan executed by the contractors themselves, and we'll support that. So it's a sort of a 3-tier approach. The TDM, though, is the main vehicle for us educating and re-educating the community about travel behaviour and about what's to be expected with the project.
Thank you. The second question is there any future proofing for MRT or ART even?
For MRT, so for light rail, no. So we've made a strategic decision not to do that. Basically, the design was too far advanced, and to add LRT would have cost a lot more. So it was a significant cost increase. But also the patronage forecast, even if we were to take a conservative approach, or sorry, an optimistic approach to that, we're well down on the numbers that would support LRT. However, ART, absolutely. So we're building a corridor here. The corridor will outlast the mode, basically.
Cool. And my last question is to do with I think Councillor Bartley mentioned it, so this project is completely reliant upon the regional fuel tax, or just partly?
Partly reliant.
Do you have a percentage?
I don't have a percentage, but I do know that I think, actually I can produce the numbers. I think it was... It's 193 million is the actual contribution. I think that's on about 800 million or so.
25, 24%.
Let's come to that while we pose another question. Are you okay, Councillor Deputy Mayor?
Yeah.
Well, Duncan's looking that up. Mayor Goff?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, no, it is worth noting that if we didn't have that 193 million, it would have been hard to progress this on time. My question is really about, you talked about the importance of mitigating disruption. The old saying, you can't make omelettes without breaking eggs. What impact is this going to have on traffic flows over the time of the construction?
So it is definitely going to have some impact. There's no point in us denying that it will not have some impact, because it will. The short answer is you can never truly predict what will happen, but we have put every measure in place we can to keep the traffic flowing. So for instance, I'll give you a good example. We've got a provision in our contract to keep 2 lanes in the peak direction. Now, we need to work with the contractor around we don't have the tenders back yet, so we don't know whether they can actually physically do it, but we've encouraged it. We also have a significant, I guess, a bonus pool for above and beyond around traffic management in particular, and also other areas as well, which is something we don't often do with even our big contracts. So we've incentivised managing the network performance. And we're about to mandate a operational task force as well within Auckland Transport, which will have real-time monitoring associated with it as well. So specific microscopic lens on this corridor in particular, and management of the signal. So a lot of what you've heard about from Chris Crichton, we're working with his team as well around that and actively managing signals. Other things we're going to do is we're going to structure we'll sequence the construction in the best way we can to help manage the traffic, and that may be doing the intersections first and opening up some of the existing bottlenecks. But as far as a general statement on the traffic, the intention is that we go as far as we can to maintaining the current level of service, but we expect it will drop, but not. The idea is for not to drop significantly. So that's the point where we come from.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Fletcher.
Mine's not a question, mine's a comment.
Absolutely.
Well, I feel really happy to have this report today, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing it before us. This project, probably for the first 6 years of the Auckland Council, I spent several hours a week on, and multiple site visits. And so seeing it come to fruition, it was a bit of a misunderstood child, it's fair to say, for a very long time. The public transport lobby, didn't understand perhaps initially what a critical piece in the jigsaw it was, and the roading lobby probably didn't understand the role that it would play in terms of public transport. It was a bit of an orphaned child, and but for the advocacy of some really good people, it wouldn't have got to the point that it has. So in acknowledging the late Dick Quacks today, this is a really special time, and I know where he has passed on that mantle for good stewardship to our incoming councillor Paul Young. I know it's in good and safe hands, but I'd also like to recognise the officers, the people like David Warburton. The CRL took the headlines from 2010 onwards, but this is one of the largest projects, and it had too little consideration given its strategic importance. So I'd like to congratulate you, Mr. Chair, for bringing it forward. I'd like to congratulate the many, many officers who have worked on this in Auckland Transport and considered, just any big project has a very long tail, and I think seeing this come today is one of those things that's really heartened me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Look, I don't take any credit here. This is actually the whole of this committee, the Finance Committee, that actually confirmed the budget, and it confirmed a regional fuel tax, because my understanding, Duncan, this project would have lagged without the regional fuel tax. And we confirmed a regional land transport plan for Auckland. We confirmed a fuel tax program, however controversial it was and possibly still is. But that is allowing this project to get ahead, and otherwise we would be not be considering this report today. So great work from all of those at the Finance Committee, governing body, yes, and this committee, but particularly Auckland Transport for bringing this forward. Much needed for East Auckland, which has been very car reliant for far too long. I understand, just speaking to this, I'm very conversant with the success of the Northern Busway. The business case for that said it would have a life of approximately 2044, 45. That's been due to the success of the Northern Busway, as evidenced at Constellation Station yesterday. The busway's life is now being seen as somewhere in 2030 to 2035, with the need to convert it to light rail. And I would anticipate we'll be probably treating with a conversion of this to a different mode that moves more people in probably a decade or so hence. So I will also congratulate Auckland Transport for grabbing the opportunity of having at its disposal the regional fuel tax monies, a full plan for the region, and getting on. This is one of the most significant projects other than the CRL, but this one in particular is seeing the regional fuel tax be put to very good use. So thank you, Duncan, if you can please convey that back to your team. Not completing there though, because I've got Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, my humble apologies for arriving late. I had a funeral service to attend in Māngere, so sorry about the confusion. Chair, this question to you, Duncan, is around connectivity and around the whole rail, bus, you name it. So, question is, what input consultation does this particular project have with the airport to Botany Rapid Transit? Because I think it's important, and I go back to your presentation when you've got 2018, 2019, you've got the Pakuranga to Botany. So from there, it's around the connectivity. What input do you have with that?
So we are working very closely with the Airport to Botany team, because effectively we both have the same project in our programs, which is the Botany interchange. And that Botany interchange is currently going through a shortlisting process. They'll have a preferred option hopefully by the end of the year. When I say they, I mean our P&I department. And then it will come to AMETI to deliver. So it will be a project with us hopefully in the new year. And with the idea is that we would try and align our consenting strategies as much as possible. So it's effectively going to become a much more real part of AMETI very shortly.
Okay, and Chair, comments as well, or just?
Yes.
Chair, I just want to reinforce the acknowledgements that people have made to the late Councillor Dick Quacks, also to the councillors at the time at Manukau. The whole genesis around this, and Councillor Stewart, you know, this whole genesis around that started at Manukau and with Auckland City and also with ARA. So, ARC, sorry. Yeah, ARC. So look, I want to acknowledge the people there from the beginning, with Chris Freak, Rick Walden, the respective mayors, Lee Orton, who ended up the CEO. I want to acknowledge them, the councillors at the time, because for us, we ended up having 1.5 billion from memory was what we ended up putting in, or the whole project. And, you know, I also want to acknowledge the people, and Chair, you mentioned the regional fuel tax. I want to acknowledge the people who voted on the regional fuel tax. I really do, because if it wasn't for that, this is exactly what we wouldn't have. And you know, that was just so important. And I've said to His Worship the Mayor and other councillors that it is important for us that we end up, for us anyway, that we end up getting projects in our respective wards that the regional fuel tax is going to benefit within our wards. Because it is important getting it there. I mean, seeing the article that we had over the news around the increase in petrol with, you know, what's riveting, it's stuck in my head, is 3.5, 3.5, 3.5. So we need to tell that story, and again, with that, it's just awesome that we are working together. And the interim transport levy, Chair, and I'm going to finish on this note, but the interim transport levy allowed the bus interchange at Otahu. It allowed also, that's an Otara Papatoetui, Mangere Otahu, but also allowed for what we've got in the Otara Papatoetui local board area, which is the Manukau interchange. You know, that interim transport levy allowed for those two projects, and you know, it's just awesome seeing all the projects that are going to come through from this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Filipaina. Councillor Lee?
Yes, thank you very much. This project has been around since about 2005 under the name of AMETI. It was the direct successor of the Hobson Bay or Eastern Highway, ill-fated. So it's not been hurried through by any means. And members you'll find in the governing body are very, very generous and gracious. Some of the comments are as if you'd actually finished it, but I understand it'll be finished maybe in 8 years' time, and good for that. Well done. Comments about the regional fuel tax. This would not have happened without the regional fuel tax. I'm sorry, this has been budgeted for years. So that is not quite true. So money may have been shifted around, and something to feel good about the fuel tax. A lot of people are not. I heard you say, well, in response to a question in regard to light rail, as we understand, there is a proposal to have light rail running from Botany to the airport. And are you saying then that this busway, unlike every other busway, is not future-proof for light rail?
The AMETI busway is not future-proof for light rail.
Not future-proof for light rail.
The airport to Botany project, though, may be also BRT, so that's not...
I'm not going to be so generous as my colleagues. I think that shows real lack of vision from Auckland Transport. In the past, this particular busway was to be future-proof for light rail, like the North Shore busway was back in the 90s. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you, Chair. No, I just want to wanted to commend the team and everyone who's come before you. I hope it can be faster. It seems like a long-term project, but I think a lot of parts of Auckland would love to see a significant kind of project like this that is going into an area which has very little, if not no, express or kind of frequent public transport services. So it will change that whole community. And yes, there the list of projects in the regional fuel tax does say 193, but actually out of the 4.3 million that comes from that comes from the NZTA subsidy and the what actually the debt to revenue is actually 743 million from the regional fuel tax that goes towards this project. So that's one issue, but I think just in general it looks like a really holistic project, and I just hope that as bits get done, we're able to use as much of it as we can along the way. So I know it's done in sections, but I just hope there's ways to be able to use.
It will be. As each stage is completed, it'll be open. So
fully functional.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Wayne Walker, Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Couple of questions. First off, just picking up on the issue that Councillor Lee raised around future-proofing for light rail. What were the additional costs for future-proofing for light rail, given that that must have had some consideration?
So they primarily relate to things like they relate mostly to the big structures. Although the geometry of what we have as well doesn't necessarily suit light rail, particularly on corners, so we would need, in some cases, to buy more land. But it's particularly around the stray current protection on structures. Stray current. So it's actually the power that powers the vehicles. It's actually managing where that current goes over structures. Now, I'm not an expert in any of this by any means, but I do know that the costs associated with it were in some cases were double the cost for some of the structures, including the big bridges. So I guess when you put that alongside the fact that even if our forecasts are optimistic, we only get really halfway to what's needed for LRT. And that's going out to 2046 when the mode could be completely different. So it was a strategic decision with an AT to not backtrack and redo it. And we would have added probably another year or year and a half to the program if we'd done that.
Okay. So just a further question on the expression. Did you say stray current?
Yes.
Is that provision of electricity through lines? So
yeah.
Is it not possible just to put the conduits in? You don't necessarily need to run the wires, but are there ways of future-proofing that aren't quite so expensive?
I'm not an expert on any of that, but I do know that it's not as simple as just putting conduits in. I think there is all sorts of other protection that has to be done to the structure to stop the current from travelling through it, but also corroding it as well.
Okay. I just signal on my part, Mr. Chair, that I have some concern that we aren't future-proofing. I think it would be useful to have some information around that. There may be ways and means of future-proofing that aren't quite so expensive. So I'm just signaling that I would like some information around that. The other question I've got just is around costs. So what sort of costs are we tracking at into the near future? You mentioned the 100 million tender that's coming up. I'm assuming we've got a number of other costs in addition to that.
Well, each component has a cost associated with it. The rolling, I think, cash flow for the program going forward beyond this year is somewhere around about $150 million a year. So that's the sort of level of spend that we're looking at across the program.
And just further to that, do we have any scenario planning if we've got cost escalations from tenders?
So yes, we certainly have allowed for, we've got a contingency on our 100 million, I'm not going to disclose that, but we do have a contingency which is to cater for higher than anticipated costs. We've just completed very recently an estimate, a full construction estimate, allowing for current market rates and that sort of thing. So I mean we have a contingency that's calculated based on a full risk assessment. And that's as robust a process as you can do. Now, you never know; things could come back slightly higher than what we anticipate. But if they do, then obviously we'll have to manage that in some way.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think that draws us to the conclusion. Oh, Councillor Lee, comment?
I'm just concerned about the length of time this has been taking. So you intend to start work next year, is that right?
So for EB1, the next phase, yes, March. So in spades in the ground.
Construction will start next year and will end in 2020.
That's 2021. So it's about a 2-year construction period for that phase.
To Botany.
No, to Pakuranga Town Centre.
It's only about a couple of kilometres, isn't it? Or
Yep, it's but it's the
kilometre
nature.
a year.
Sorry, what was that?
So the whole thing is about 7.6 kilometres, and it's going to take to 2028. I think that's 2026. That's very, very slow. I'm going to be frank with you. That's hopeless.
Well, first of all, the update to that is it's mid 2025. So that
Okay,
we've moved on a little bit.
Well, it's coming forward. I'm sorry, that's way too slow for 7.6 kilometres. That's pathetic.
So what it reflects is the nature of that corridor and the business on that corridor. So we do know that, yes, it is a long, so it's effectively, we've just had literally in the last week the construction timeframe reviewed for the component from Pakuranga Creek down to Botany, which is where the big business is, the Bunnings and all those areas. And it's a 4-year construction period for that route because of the disruption to business. So
And not future-proof for light rail.
It's not future-proof for light rail. But we are working on how to bring that duration down at the moment. So our procurement strategy is under review specifically to look at how can we speed it up. One issue is that the consenting phase, we have to allow for at least a year of appeals as I guess a realistic view of what that could take. So that's very much on the critical path is the notice of requirement. And then, like I say, it's a long period of construction because it is the potential for disruption to major business down there has to be managed quite carefully. But there are some mechanisms to speed that up.
Sorry, thank you. Mayor Goff.
Just one additional question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, everybody would love to see it future-proofed for light rail, but that costs money. And if you vote against revenue, I don't know where you find that money, but what would the sort of cost be?
To vote against waste.
Yeah, sure. You've been on the council a long time, councillor, to do that.
Got worse under you, Mr.
Could I ask you what would be the cost if it were to be future-proofed for light rail, which, from what you've said, might also involve a change in design and layout of the road?
I don't think I have that. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I could certainly provide that.
I think that'd be helpful. We'd ideally love it to be future-proofed, but if it's going to cost billions and light rail wouldn't be there for several decades, then probably your decision has some rationale behind it. But I think we need to know that.
Yep.
Thank you. All complete there in contributions, members. It's moved and seconded by the Howick Ward councillors, Councillor Paul Young and Councillor Sharon Stewart. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, and declare that carried. Members, I just want to remind you that in 40 minutes we commence a workshop. So I think it's probably best to take our lunch break now, and then we will. So I will adjourn this meeting for the break, and we will need to pick it up after the lunch break.
Mr. Chairman.
But Councillor Fletcher, then Councillor Clough.
I'm very aware that we have the chair of the Puketapapa local board who has waited patiently all morning for the agenda item that has been so dear to his community's heart. I wonder, as a courtesy, and I don't believe the matter is going to take terribly long, I just wondered, in fairness, whether it would be possible to advance that item before we take a lunch break.
Well, I've also got...
Which was my point as well.
The chair of Otara Papatoetoe, Lydia Sosini, who would like to... I'm going to reopen the local board input. Sorry, wrong one. Wrong one. My apologies, Lydia. Just come up the geography a little bit. So I need to reopen the local board input as well. I'm mindful of her attendance here. I need to open this meeting at 1:30 because we have other people coming for it from NZTA, isn't it? It's a closed workshop, and so there's a matter of clearing this room and then